Welcome to English Reading for Learning.
Typical boy? Chapter 1. On 3. Early in the morning, while dew still sparkled on the grass, Alex rode her bike toward Tim's house. Alex spent every summer day with her best friend at the nearby pond. She hadn't even called him this morning. She didn't have to. She knew he would be waiting on his porch, his skin shiny with sunscreen. "It's hot," Tim said as Alex arrived. "It's summer," Alex replied, grinning. Leaving her bike at Tim's house, she walked beside Tim from his house to the pond. Each wanted to start running, but they had a rule. The race didn't begin until they were both in the water. They threw their towels on the bank beside the lifeguard's chair and leaped onto their favorite rock next to the pond. "On 3, Tim said. 1, 2, 3, they shouted as they dove in together. Alex loved the feeling of water swirling over her skin. She swam strong and straight. She didn't stop for air until she touched the scratchy plastic rope that marked the edge of the public swimming area. Tim, as always, lagged a few strokes behind her. "Best 2 out of 3? She asked. Tim dunked his head and shook his hair. "On 3, he said. They raced again. Alex sailed through the water like a dolphin. She had climbed the rock and settled in the sun by the time Tim waded out after her. He lay down on the big rock, his arm over his eyes. "Not bad for the first race of the year," Alex said, elbowing him gently. "My legs are sore," Tim said. "How come?" she asked. "I joined the flag football team that my dad coaches. Our first practice was yesterday," Tim said, propping himself up on his elbows. Why would Tim want to play football with so much running and catching when he can't even beat me at swimming? Alex studied her toes. They were white and wrinkled from the water. She wondered if Tim was going to have time to come to the pond. "Football is just a bunch of dumb boys in helmets crashing into each other," she said. "We don't use helmets in flag football," Tim said. "Whatever. Are you just playing because your dad made you?" Alex realized that she sounded meaner than she wanted to. "He's not making me," Tim said. He acted as if he couldn't find a comfortable way to sit. He put his arm over his face again as the morning sun grew hot. Alex imagined coming to the pond alone to swim without her best friend. When Tim finished his laps, Dad handed him a belt with 2 yellow flags for a practice game. Tim joined James, the yellow team's quarterback, for a huddle. James should fake a pass, then hand it off to Jorge to run it, Nate said. Tim looked over at the kids wearing red flags. "No, we shouldn't run it," he said. "They have Andy, Tina, and Han. At least one of them would be able to catch Jorge. We should pass." "We can fake a run and then pass it," said James. "Good idea," said Tim. They broke from the huddle and lined up. The red team was already lined up across from them. They looked tense and swift. "Hut!" shouted James. Out of the corner of his eye, Tim saw James fake the handoff to Jorge. Immediately, all the fast red team runners swarmed around Jorge. This left Tim and 4 other yellow team players wide open. Seeing this, James passed to Eva, who caught the ball and sprinted 15 yards before being flagged. "You kids are playing some smart football," Dad said when they all got into the next huddle. "Tim's got all the ideas," James shrugged. Dad only smiled a little, but Tim could tell that he was proud. When they finished the practice game, the team huddled around the coaches. They all wondered what the coach would have them do next. "Ice cream?" Tim asked hopefully. "After another 2 laps, hollered Dad. The team groaned as the coach blew his whistle. Chapter 3. Maybe later. Alex pushed her sister Amy on her swing. She felt as if she had been doing this for hours. She stopped pushing and wandered over to the patio chair where she had left a magazine. Amy's swing went slower and slower and finally came to a stop. "Alex," she shouted, "you stopped pushing." "Pump your legs," Alex shouted back. "You can keep your swing moving yourself." "I don't want to," Amy said. "Well, I don't want to push anymore," Alex said, trying to read. Amy began to fuss. "Okay, one last time," Alex sighed. She pushed Amy until the little girl giggled, then escaped into the house before the swing could slow down again. She stood in the kitchen alone. Dad was in his office upstairs, and Mom was at work. "I'm going to the pond," she finally yelled. She would go swimming with or without Tim. As she rode by Tim's house, Alex spotted Tim's father's white baseball cap over the backyard fence. Tim was home from practice. Alex got off her bike and slipped through the back gate. Tim's dad held the football while Tim stood at the other end of the lawn. His dad faked a pass left, then tossed the ball low and fast to the right. Tim shuffled quickly for the catch. His dad switched to defense, hopping lightly on each foot. Tim jogged to the right, and his dad came after him. Suddenly, Tim dashed to the left, just out of his father's reach. Tim raced to the fence near Alex, scoring a touchdown. "Oh, hi, Alex," Tim finally said, panting. Tim wiped the sweat from his face with his shirt. "Feel like swimming?" Alex asked. Dad and I were going to work out some plays this afternoon. Maybe later," Tim said. Alex tried not to look disappointed. "Okay," she said. "I'll be at our rock." "Okay," Tim shouted. He tossed the ball to his father and crouched again, ready for the pass. Alex knew she shouldn't feel hurt just because Tim would rather play football with his father than go swimming with her. She knew Tim wanted to make his dad proud of him. She just wished she didn't feel so left out of everything. Alex wheeled her bike to the pond. She tossed down her towel and stood on the rock, about to jump in the water. Just then the lifeguard stood up and blew her whistle. 5-minute break! Everyone out of the water!" she shouted. It just wasn't Alex's day. Chapter 4. A Typical Girl? Tim and Dad were unloading equipment for practice when Tim spotted a familiar bike coming around the corner. "Is it too late to join the team?" Alex asked Tim's dad, resting her bike on the ground. "I have my permission slip and everything." "It would be great to have you, Alex," Dad said happily. Alex elbowed Tim, grinning. Something about Alex being there made Tim uncomfortable. "I thought you said football was dumb," he said. "Well, I've never tried it before," she said, shrugging. "Okay, kids, warm up laps," Dad shouted, blowing his whistle. The team got into a line and began jogging around the field. The laps were getting easier for Tim, but he was still near the back of the line. Alex passed him as though he were walking. Next, they did side shuffle drills, moving like crabs. Tim tripped over his own shoes while Alex danced along. Then Dad threw long passes down the field to each player. When it was Alex's turn, she flew down the field, making a spectacular catch. "She's a natural," Dad said. This made Tim frown. "Time for a practice game," Dad yelled. Alex may have done great during the drills, but once she was on the field for a game, she looked lost. On the first play, she turned the wrong way and ended up behind the quarterback, confused and useless. On another play, she made a great catch, but then, crunch! She collided head-on with a tangle of players from the other team. Alex collapsed on the ground, holding her knee. A trickle of blood seeped between her fingers and ran down her leg. Dad and some of the other players ran over and crouched next to her. "I'm fine," she said, trying to be brave, but she was sniffing. "I just skinned it." "Let's clean that up," Dad said. Tim gently helped her to her feet. She leaned on Tim as they hopped off the field together. "That's what you get for running straight at a lineman," Han said behind them. Alex glared at him. "Yeah, she should have stayed behind the quarterback," another person said. The group snickered. Tears began to flow down Alex's cheeks. "You know, you don't have to run once you catch the ball. You can look around a few seconds once you've got it," Tim suggested. "Other players might look scary, but you can outrun them if you just find the right way to go around them." Alex bit her lip as Tim's dad cleaned her leg and put a bandage over her knee. "I'm going to the restroom," Alex mumbled, limping toward the school. "If you make a good catch, sometimes you don't even need to run," Tim said, following her. "You can just get flagged. You'll still have made a first down." Alex limped faster than Tim could walk. He just jogged after her. "Or you could run to the sidelines and not lose yards." Suddenly, Alex whirled around, her face red with fury. "Is that all you care about?" she hissed. "I hate this stupid game. It's just a bunch of mean boys running around, and you're just like them." "I'm your best friend," Tim said, stunned. "If you were my best friend, you wouldn't have let them make fun of me. I just realized that you're a typical boy, just like them. All you want to do is play football for your dad." She turned and limped angrily toward the school. "Well, maybe they wouldn't make fun of you if you weren't such a girl," he muttered. Alex froze. "What did you say?" "That's just like a girl," Tim said louder. "You say something's dumb when you haven't even tried it. Then you start crying and give up." "Fine," Alex said, climbing awkwardly onto her bike. "I guess you don't need me for your stupid team, then." Tim stood there motionless as Alex rode away. How had they ended up fighting with each other? They'd never gotten angry with each other before. Chapter 5. Sometimes sad, sometimes mad. Alex touched the plastic rope, drew a big breath, turned, and surged through the water again. In a few moments, she touched the rock. She turned and swam back to the rope. It seemed as if she was more exhausted than usual. She still spent every morning at the pond, but she swam less and less each day. She climbed onto the rock and examined the scab on her knee. It was gross and white from the water, but it was almost gone. She hadn't seen Tim in nearly 2 weeks. Sometimes she missed him. And sometimes, when she remembered that practice, she realized she was still angry. She decided to quit swimming for the day. She picked up her towel and walked to her bike. As she rode by Tim's house, she looked over the back fence. Maybe he'd see her towel and wet hair, and he'd be jealous that she got to swim while he had to run laps. "Typical boy," she muttered. As she took a last look at Tim's yard, she couldn't help feeling sad that he wasn't there. Chapter 6. Game Day. It was game day. Tim was standing with the rest of the team waiting for the game to start. "Nervous?" Dad asked. "A little," Tim admitted, taking a few deep breaths. For a moment he wished that Alex were there. She was fearless, and that's what Tim needed to be right now. But Tim shook off that idea. Alex hadn't been so fearless when she came to that practice, he thought. It's better not to have such a girly girl on our team. Tim managed to find an open spot during each play. Little by little, they inched toward the end zone. They scored only 1 touchdown, but that was 1 more touchdown than the other team had. The team went out for pizza to celebrate their victory. While they were eating, Dad leaned over and said to Tim, "We could have used a good runner like Alex." Tim shrugged. "She wasn't that good." "She would have gotten better after a few tries," Dad said. "Did something happen between you two? You don't seem to be going to the pond anymore." Tim had to chew and swallow a big bite of pizza before he could talk. "I don't know. She's such a girl sometimes." Dad looked confused. "What do you mean, such a girl? Alex always seemed like a tough kid to me. Maybe you should talk to her." Tim sighed. He was still angry that Alex had called him a typical boy. Despite that, Tim was afraid that he had lost his best friend. Chapter 7. You Win. Alex swam with her face underwater until she touched the rock. When she looked up, Tim had suddenly appeared above her. "Race you?" Tim said from the rock. "You scared me," Alex accused as she wiped the water out of her eyes. "On 3, he said, as if he hadn't heard her. He hopped into the water, ready to race. She hadn't been racing when she swam lately, But she was sure she would beat Tim. She always beat Tim. On the count of 3, she carved through the water like a knife. She didn't look left or right until she touched the scratchy rope. But Tim was already there, treading water and smiling. "Did you beat me?" Alex asked, surprised. "Yep," Tim said. Just then, Alex hated him. All he wanted to do was win, just like every boy. She began to swim away from him toward shore. "Best 2 out of 3?" he called after her. She paused. "Why not?" she thought as she swam back toward him. "On 3, she called. Alex swam furiously. She knew she had to swim her fastest this time. She touched the rock and lifted her head just in time to see Tim, barely a second behind. "I won," she said. "Next one decides it," Tim replied. "On 3. Alex plunged into the water again. She could hear Tim as he splashed right beside her. He was swimming faster than he had ever swum before. She clenched her teeth and swam as fast as she could, almost sailing right over the rope. When she looked up, Tim was half a stroke behind her. Both of them were gasping for breath. "You win," Tim said as he panted. "I always win," Alex said with a grin. "I always wish I were faster," Tim said. "But I also think it's cool that you're good at swimming." Alex treaded water. Tim had never said how he felt about losing every race. "I'm not mad because you're good at swimming. Why are you mad because I'm good at football?" he asked. "I guess I'm not mad at you for being good at football," Alex said, figuring something out in her head. "I'm mad because it seemed like you cared about football more than you cared about me. When I hurt my knee, all you did was tell me how to play better. You didn't seem worried about my knee at all. I didn't think your knee was hurt that bad. I know that you like to be the best at things. You're almost like a typical boy that way. I wanted to help you be better, so you'd have more fun," Tim said. "I did care about you." It was almost funny. Alex was like a typical boy who wanted to beat everybody, and sometimes Tim was a typical girl who tried to understand other people's feelings. "I'm sorry I got mad at you," Alex said. "I wasn't thinking about your feelings." "I'm sorry I called you a typical girl," Tim said. "Yeah," Alex laughed. "What's wrong with being a girl? A girl beats you at swimming." Tim laughed too. "You want to bet?" he asked. "On 3, Alex shouted. 1, 2, 3. Tim and Alex plunged into the water, side by side.
Thanks for watching and listening. Please click like and subscribe for new and latest uploads.